My name is Daren Frankel. I'm a blockchain technology advisor and analyst, currently working in Dubai, helping advise the government on building the world's first blockchain-powered city. So blockchain in its simplest form is a distributed database. It has a lot of special properties, which you'll hear a lot. Immutable, distributed, cryptographically secure. But the simplest way to think about blockchain is it's a digital system with no center. It's a data structure in which, rather than having a centralized point of connection, you can think of this like Facebook, where when you're actually interacting with, when you think you're interacting with your friends, you're actually talking to Facebook, who's in turn talking to your friends for you. So that's an example of a classic centralized system where you talk to one intermediary and then they send your message forward. In a blockchain world, there is no intermediary. You actually have, on your side, you'd have the same copy of the information that your friend would be sharing, and you'd be talking directly to one another. So what blockchain does is it takes these classical systems of centralized infrastructure and creates a distributed network, a network in which the same information, a copy of the same database, is shared amongst everyone who's involved in that network. Bitcoin was actually the first implementation, and in fact, Bitcoin came before the term blockchain. Bitcoin used this technology of a distributed database to create a peer-to-peer digital currency that didn't need to be backed by any sort of government to exist. The rules of that currency, how you spend it, how you accumulate it, how it's created in the system, was all determined at the onset of the network. And because of the nature of blockchain, where once you set the rules in motion, it takes a significant portion of the network to actually change those rules, the network continues to function by the rules that the network agrees to. And that's how Bitcoin is created. So I can't give investment advice. I will start by saying that. And there are great things going on. I think decentralized currencies, digital currency as a construct has a lot of value, but in terms of what the actual value of a coin should be, that's not something that I really even know myself. And so do I think that they have value? Yes. Should people start to play around with digital currency? Yes. How much they should buy is no more than they're willing to lose, in fact, because the value of a digital coin, the value of a Bitcoin, it could go up, it could go down any day. But I think digital currencies are here to stay. It's just hard to say what the value will be. So I think starting to get familiar with how they work, starting to put a small amount of money into Bitcoin or into another digital currency like Ether, which is one that I work with frequently, or Ethereum, I think that's valuable. But to say that it's a worthy investment is a different question. I think it affects politics greatly. There are, and you can see governments responding around the world, where Bitcoin creates, and other digital currencies as well, create a means of circumventing sanctions and your own government, who may want to put restrictions on its use because they want to create, or they want to keep an ecosystem of more control. Bitcoin, digital currencies create a system where it's almost censor-proof. And so whether or not a government wants or allows its citizens or its people to use these digital currencies, there's still a way for people to transact with them. So if you're a government who really looks at to keep tight control over your own economics, where you have hyperinflation in some parts of the world. I have friends from Venezuela where they're seeing this happen, right in front of them. Digital currency becomes a way of kind of almost fighting back against the controls that your government is trying to put on you. So I think in some parts of the world where you do have this conflict, you see digital currencies on the rise because it's a way of still storing value and transacting and doing business with not only within your country but also the outside world. It's having a currency that is backed by people, because one of the things that as a government you have the responsibility to your citizens. Money is a fiat currencies are a very important part of how the economic system works. But if you see your economic system failing, as you do in many of these countries where you experience hyperinflation, where you can't trust your own money, the government maybe is printing too much, or they're trying to inject capital and it's just causing things to go haywire. Bitcoin, Ether, digital currencies become a way to kind of push back almost, or remove yourself from that system where you have no control anymore. And for governments, that is a brand new concept where people can say, I don't want to be a part of this system anymore. I'm going to enter this new digital system and I don't need you to do it. Property, and so I think one thing that is an important concept is something called a digital asset. So on top of these blockchain systems, on top of Bitcoin, on top of Ethereum, on top of any of these networks, you can actually create what are called digital assets. Essentially, a digital asset is a token that represents ownership of something other than the digital currency. It could be a unit of gold, it could be a house, it could be a car. And so what these technologies also promise is the ability to exchange digital assets more freely. So perhaps I can now trade my car directly for a digital currency. Very simple. I can trade the title as well. So these types of systems where you have digital assets, where you have digital tokens representing real world goods, it still represents some challenges in implementation. Of course, it also requires governments to recognize, especially if you're doing business on a public network like Bitcoin or Ethereum. If you're doing business on one of these, it takes a government to recognize that that digital asset, that token, represents true ownership of the physical asset. Those types of structures require kind of legal recognition, regulatory recognition within kind of a domain, unless you trust the party who's saying, I back this token, is holding the good for you. Where we do see companies spinning up tokens where those tokens represent ownership of real tangible goods like gold, for instance. There are gold-backed tokens that people use to exchange as well. I think it's very difficult. So if we look at just purely digital currency, just a Bitcoin or an Ether, which don't require that sort of backing of a government, you create this peer-to-peer store of value instead of the state-backed store of value. Right now, we're seeing a period of intense volatility because people are still trying to grasp the technology, want to be involved, see a future in it, but it's still very, very early in the lifetime of these technologies. So when you introduce something like a digital asset that requires a central party to regulate, it's a very different case than a digital currency outright, which doesn't require that, and having the Bitcoin itself is the value, versus having a gold token, although creates this more fluid means of exchange, and maybe I can exchange that gold token for another digital asset or digital currency. It still has some of those ties to a centralized system. But in many of these cases, when you have a company backing gold, or backing these gold tokens, it's not necessarily a government. It could be a third party, it could be a business owner who is creating a business out of holding gold on behalf of its owners. And these types of services, I should stress services. This is a service someone is providing to you, and so when you use this token, that's kind of the connection, is through this provider. It's not necessarily a government backing it, although there are governments who are looking to use those types of systems to hold assets for consumers.
To control the people again through currency, like it was
before? So I don't think digital currency. So I should say I don't think fiat currencies are all bad. In fact, I think there are elements of traditional currencies in the economic system that are very, very valuable, especially in the near and long term. I think when handled correctly, fiat currencies, like if I look at the US dollar, since I'm from the States, printing more money is not a problem. It actually can be a very, very good thing for stimulating the economy. Printing more money and devaluing your currency encourages people to spend it more, which helps raise the economy in a recession or a downturn. That's something you can't currently, and I don't think in the near or long term that we're going to see with, well, we're not going to see with digital currencies because there's a fixed supply. And so you lose one of these economic controls that is currently valuable for a traditional economic system. If we look, though, at the future, and I'm talking about long in the future, where it could be that digital currencies are the standard and fiat currencies are, disappearing slowly into the background, that's a completely different kind of economy and a completely different kind of way, a different way of regulating an economy, or something that would need to be kind of sorted out along that path. I think they coexist, and maybe disappear into the background is not the right term. I think that fiat currencies, state-backed currencies, like the lira, like the dollar, I think you're going to see them digitize. I think you're going to see a system where changing between a Bitcoin or Ether and a fiat currency and a state-backed currency is more seamless because they're both issued on a similar platform where they can talk to each other. And I can exchange directly through one of these blockchain platforms. I think that's the future we're moving towards because there is still a lot of value in the economic system as it's been built today. It's just very, very easy to, if you don't have the right kind of foresight, if you don't have the right kind of controls in place, the right kind of experts, it can be very, very easy to let the systems run awry. And so I think coexisting is really the future that we're going to see.